My name is Gina Jameson, and I was 43 years old when I finally understood that being indispensable can be the most dangerous position a woman can hold. For 15 years, I was the person everyone called when things went wrong. Not because it was in my job description, but because when systems failed, weather turned hostile, or executives made promises they couldn't keep, I was the one who could fix it. At Bridgewater Freight, my title was Senior Regional Coordinator. It sounded impressive enough to outsiders. Inside the company, it meant I carried responsibility 2 levels above my pay grade, absorbed pressure, meant for executives, and delivered results that other people proudly took credit for in boardrooms I was never invited into. When blizzards shut down mountain passes during peak shipping season, my phone rang. When wildfire smoke grounded half our fleet in the Pacific Northwest, someone forwarded the chaos to my inbox. When a major manufacturing client threatened to walk because upper management fumbled an account review, I was looped in, quietly expected to stabilize everything without making noise. And every single time I did. Not because I needed applause, but because I believed in the work. I believed in doing things right, even when no one was watching. At home, my boyfriend, Daniel Jameson, had learned to read my silences. He could tell when I'd spent another night solving problems that weren't supposed to be mine. Our kids would ask why I missed dinner again, and I'd tell them it was just a busy week, knowing full well busy weeks had turned into busy years. I kept promising that once the promotion came through, things would change. Less firefighting, more control, more balance. I believed that lie because it was the only way the sacrifices made sense. The vice president role had been dangled in front of me for 2 years. 2 years of the board just needs to finalize things of your next in line of calendar invites, titled VP Transition Planning. By month 6, I started documenting everything. Not out of paranoia, out of survival. Every email, every promise, every meeting. Because women like me learn early that memory isn't enough. Proof is currency. The meeting that broke everything happened on a Friday afternoon at exactly 3:00 p.m. I sat across from Warren Hale, Vice President of Operations, in his corner office, decorated with fake plants and motivational posters about teamwork. He delivered the news like he was reading off a grocery list. The board decided to pause the VP expansion. Economic pressures, nothing personal. I repeated the word pause calmly. I reminded him about the calendar invite he'd sent 3 weeks earlier. He shrugged. Priorities shift. Budgets change. We all have to adapt. I had been adapting for 15 years. When I asked about compensation, about aligning my salary with the responsibilities I was already carrying, his expression changed, almost amused. That's when he said it. You're excellent at being the one we call Gina, but that's not executive material. The words didn't explode. They sank, quietly, deeply. He continued talking about fresh talent, strategic vision, modern thinking. Then he checked his phone mid-sentence and ended the meeting with a line that clarified everything. If this isn't working for you, you should be grateful you have stability. You're not the future here. You're the infrastructure. I walked out of his office knowing something had finally snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly, like a cord being cut. And Warren had no idea he'd just lit the fuse. I didn't cry after that meeting. That surprised me more than anything. I walked back to my office, closed the door, sat at my desk, and just breathed. Years of managing emergencies had trained me well. Panic wastes time, emotion, clouds, judgment, and clarity always comes after stillness. I replayed Warren's words in my head, not to torture myself, but to understand them. Infrastructure. The thing everyone relies on, but never thanks. The thing that's only noticed when it breaks. He hadn't insulted my competence. He'd confirmed my value and then explained exactly why they would never reward it. Most people, when something like that happens, go home and vent. They complain to their partner, pour a glass of wine, and convince themselves to keep their head down a little longer. I didn't do that. I opened the folder on my computer labeled VP Documentation. Inside were 15 years of quiet receipts, performance reviews, calling me essential emails, praising my leadership during crisis budget drafts, listing the VP role as approved, and the calendar invite Warren swore had never meant anything. It was all there. The lie wasn't subtle, it was systemic. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. How did it go? I'm so excited for you. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I thought about our kids in the living room, probably assuming tonight would be a celebration. I thought about the promises I'd made next year will be different. This is the last stretch, just one more hurdle. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't ready to explain something I'd only just understood myself. Instead, I opened emails I'd been ignoring for months. Recruiters, former colleagues, people who had left Bridgewater and quietly thrived elsewhere. Messages that all said the same thing in different tones. You're wasting your talent. They don't deserve you. Call me if you're ready. I dismissed them because loyalty had felt like a virtue, because walking away felt like quitting, because women are taught that endurance is strength even when it's killing us. One email stopped me cold. It was 3 weeks old, untouched, sitting there like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Subject line: Would you consider a conversation? It was from Nathan Brooks, founder and CEO of Apex Logistics. His reputation in the industry was almost mythic, brilliant operations, ruthless efficiency, and an almost rebellious habit of actually promoting the people who did the work. I opened it with the kind of caution you reserve for things that might change your life. He didn't waste words. He referenced my winter logistics protocol from years ago, the one Bridgewater had rebranded as executive strategy. He mentioned a framework I'd presented at a regional summit, something I'd shared freely because I believed good ideas should travel. We teach your work to our new hires, he wrote. If you're ever open to leading at a higher level, I'd like to talk. No games. No promises, no delays, no condescension, just recognition. I replied, before fear could catch up. I'm available this weekend if you are. He answered within 15 minutes. Tomorrow, 9:30 a.m., Apex headquarters. When I finally went home that night, Daniel knew something was wrong the moment he saw my face. He didn't push. He just waited until the kids were distracted and asked me to sit with him at the kitchen table. I told him everything. The meeting, the dismissal, the word infrastructure echoing in my head like a verdict. I told him about the email from Nathan. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he asked one question. What do you want to do? I surprised myself with how quickly the answer came. I don't want to be someone's backup plan anymore. He nodded once, slow and certain. Then don't be. You've given them enough of your life. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without waking up to check my phone. Somewhere deep down, I already knew. The pause wasn't real. The promotion had never been meant for me. And the moment I stopped believing their story, everything else started to line up. By morning, I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Apex Logistics didn't look like Bridgewater. That was the first thing I noticed when I pulled into the parking lot the next morning. No cracked asphalt, no flickering lights, just glass steel and quiet confidence. The kind of building that doesn't need to announce its importance because everything inside it already works. The receptionist greeted me by name before I even opened my mouth. That alone felt surreal. 15 years at Bridgewater and half the front desk still asked if I was new. Here, someone had taken the time to know who I was before I arrived. Nathan Brooks met me outside the conference room. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, no performative warmth, no rehearsed small talk. He didn't ask about traffic or compliment my resume. He opened a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were printouts of my work, conference presentations I'd given on my own time, process diagrams I'd shared at industry summits, articles I'd written that Bridgewater had quietly circulated internally without my name attached. I felt something tighten in my chest, not pride exactly, but the strange ache of being seen after years of invisibility. I've followed your work for a long time, Nathan said. Your winter rerouting protocol cut our delay penalties by 60% when we adapted it. We teach it to new coordinators. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was painfully validating. Bridgewater had treated that same system like a lucky accident, something that had just happened. You don't know what happened on Friday, I said. Nathan leaned back slightly. I don't need to. Companies like yours confuse loyalty with weakness. They keep their strongest people exactly where they can exploit them. There was no bitterness in his voice, just observation. He slid a second folder toward me. This one was thinner. He didn't frame it as an opportunity. He didn't ask me to wait for approvals or talk about next quarter. He simply said, this is the role we need filled. Vice President of Regional Operations, full authority over staffing strategy and execution. A salary 40% higher than what I was making. Equity. A signing bonus that made my stomach flip. And something I hadn't had in 15 years, control. Real control. When do you need an answer, I asked, even though I already knew. Today if you can, he said, but I respect thoughtful decisions. I thought about Warren's office, about fake plants and empty promises, about being told I wasn't leadership material while carrying the weight of the entire operation. I picked up the pen and signed before fear could talk me out of it. Nathan smiled, not triumphantly, just satisfied. One more thing, he said. If you know good people who deserve better, I'm listening. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. We both knew the kind of loyalty that forms when leadership actually shows up. That afternoon, I drove home in silence. When I told Daniel, he hugged me, like he'd been holding his breath for years. But the real moment came later when I opened my laptop and started writing my transition memo. Not a resignation yet, just a map. Every system I'd built, every protocol I'd memorized, every fragile connection I'd been quietly holding together. I wrote it calmly, professionally, thoroughly. And at the end, I added one line. I'm available for post-departure consulting at a standard executive rate. It wasn't about money, it was about truth, about making it impossible for them to pretend they didn't know what they were losing. I sent my resignation that Sunday night. 5 minutes later, my access was revoked. That told me everything. The speed with which Bridgewater cut my access should have hurt more than it did. 5 minutes. 15 years reduced to an automated system notification. No call, no courtesy, no thank you. Just a quiet confirmation that the moment I stopped being useful on their terms, I became a liability. Warren called at 12:03 a.m. I watched the phone light up on the nightstand and let it ring. He called again, then again. He left a voicemail I didn't listen to. By the fourth attempt, I turned the phone face down and went back to sleep beside Daniel, who stirred just enough to pull me closer without waking fully. I remember thinking how strange it was that I felt calmer than I had in years, even as everything I'd built was officially behind me. Monday morning, I didn't rush. I made breakfast with my kids. I walked them to the door. I kissed Daniel goodbye and drove to my new office with the quiet confidence of someone who had already survived the worst part. Apex didn't greet me with chaos. There were no emergencies waiting, no fires to put out before I'd even logged in. Just a clean desk, a view of the city, and a calendar that didn't feel like a trap. At 8:07 a.m., my personal phone buzzed. The message wasn't from Warren. It was a forwarded email from one of my senior coordinators. I am resigning effective in 2 weeks. No explanation, no flourish, just fact. At 9:12, another. At 9:55, a third. 3 resignations in less than 2 hours. I hadn't said a word to any of them. I hadn't recruited. I hadn't hinted. I'd simply left. At 10:23, Warren finally reached me. He didn't bother with a greeting. Gina, what did you do? His voice was tight, defensive, already searching for someone else to blame. He accused me of coordination, of sabotage, of creating a mass exit. I told him the truth. They were adults. They made their own choices. I reminded him about the transition memo I'd sent, about the documentation, about the consulting offer. This looks bad, he snapped. The board is furious. It should, I said calmly. You had 15 years to retain the people who built your systems. He warned me not to escalate. He warned me that this would follow me, that my reputation would suffer. I listened, then ended the call without raising my voice. By Tuesday, the messages started coming from people I barely remembered. Questions dressed up as polite inquiries. Panic wrapped in professionalism. Nobody understands the winter reroute protocol. We missed 3 priority deadlines. Hartley's rep is screaming. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Systems built on unrecognized labor don't explode. They unravel. Quietly. One unanswered email. One missed handoff. One decision made without context. And then another. By Wednesday, the first client complaint went public. By Thursday, Warren had made his second catastrophic mistake. He put her in charge. The woman who replaced me wasn't qualified. Everyone knew that. She had been an analyst on paper, 18 months of tenure, 0 operational experience, and yet there she was, sitting in emergency planning meetings, making routing decisions that cost thousands per hour. People noticed things they'd once ignored. Her late arrivals, early departures, the way Warren shielded her from consequences while others absorbed the fallout, the way he defended her mistakes with language he'd never used for anyone else. By the end of the week, 2 more coordinators quit. Both cited management concerns. Both had stayed for years because I made the job survivable. Bridgewater didn't collapse in a single moment. It began failing the way all neglected systems do, predictably, inevitably, and in full view of the people who'd warned them for years. And Warren still didn't understand that this wasn't revenge. It was exposure. By the second week, the pattern was impossible to ignore. The woman Warren installed to temporarily oversee operations was named Maya Reynolds. Officially, she had been a strategic operations analyst. In practice, she had never managed a live crisis, never rerouted fleets under pressure, never taken a call from a client whose production line was about to shut down because a shipment was stuck in the wrong place. Those of us who had worked the floor knew the difference immediately. Strategy looks elegant on slides. Operations bleed in real time. Maya walked into meetings with confidence that hadn't been earned yet, armed with summaries, instead of understanding. She questioned protocols without grasping why they existed. She dismissed contingencies as inefficient. And Warren backed her every single time, even when the room went quiet with disbelief. The first disaster was small enough to be brushed off. A reroute decision made without checking seasonal carrier reliability. A delay that cost a few thousand in penalties. Warren called it a learning curve and praised her decisive leadership in a company-wide email. People exchanged looks. No one said anything. The second disaster couldn't be hidden. I had documented an upcoming highway closure weeks in advance, alternate routes, mapped carriers, pre-approved, contingency timelines, clearly laid out. The notes were explicit. Do not use the primary corridor during construction. Maya reviewed the documentation, decided the alternate routes were inefficient, and sent the trucks down the main highway anyway. They sat there for 14 hours. 3 missed deliveries. $68,000 in penalties. One furious client who demanded to know who had authorized the decision. Warren defended her publicly. Privately, he scrambled. He sent emails praising her steady hand under pressure while quietly pulling favors to keep the client from escalating. The team tried to explain why the protocols existed. He shut them down. That was when people started talking not loudly, not recklessly, but carefully, comparing notes, remembering moments they'd dismissed as coincidence, private meetings behind glass walls, projects reassigned without explanation, performance metrics bent just enough to justify advancement that made no operational sense. The third disaster was Hartley. Maya emailed their logistics director with a tone meant to project confidence. Instead, it revealed how little she understood the account. She reversed shipping priorities, referenced protocols we didn't use, and promised capacity we couldn't deliver. The director forwarded the email to 3 executives with a single line, "Who is this person, and why is she making decisions about our routing?" That message reached Bridgewater's executive team within an hour. By the time Hartley terminated their contract, $28 million in annual revenue gone, nobody was surprised. Another major client followed days later, then another. The industry noticed. Deals stalled. Competitors circled. Resignations continued. Warren sent company-wide emails about perseverance and teamwork, about rising to challenges, about believing in leadership during transition. No one believed him anymore. Not the staff, not the clients, not the board members asking increasingly pointed questions. I watched it all from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a strange, hollow calm. This wasn't chaos. It was consequence. 15 years of decisions finally adding up, and Warren still hadn't made the call he swore he never would, the one where pride gives way to panic. The call came on a Thursday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. I knew it before I answered. The timing was too deliberate, the silence before the ring too heavy. I let it ring 3 times, not out of spite, but because I wanted Warren to sit in the weight of those seconds. When I picked up, his voice barely sounded like the man who'd dismissed me weeks earlier. "Gina," he said, and for the first time there was no authority in it. Just exhaustion. "We need to talk." "Okay." A pause. He was waiting for me to fill the space to make this easier. I didn't. "We need you back," he said finally. "Operations are in crisis. Clients are leaving. The board is concerned." Concerned. That was one way to describe it. He didn't waste time pretending anymore. He offered everything. The VP title, immediate and official. Compensation far beyond what we discussed before. Equity. Performance bonuses. Direct reporting to the board. No oversight from his office. Authority he'd guarded for 15 years suddenly available because now, suddenly, it was worth the price. 3 weeks ago, I wasn't leadership material. Now he had 20% more than a competitor's salary just lying around. If I should have had this years ago, I asked calmly, why didn't I? Silence, thick and revealing. "The situation has changed," he said. "You mean you need me now?" He tried a different angle. 30 days. Just 30 days to stabilize things, train replacements, smooth the transition. I recognized the trap immediately. 30 days becomes 60. Guilt becomes obligation. The cycle resets. I'm not coming back, I said. Not for 30 days. Not for any amount of money. His tone sharpened. He warned me about investigations, about reputational damage, about how ugly this could get. I reminded him of the transition memo, of the consulting offer, of the documentation. Tell the board the truth, I said. You had 15 years to promote the people who built your stability. You chose not to. He tried one last time. He admitted mistakes, said we could fix this, make it right. No, I said quietly. You can make it expensive, but you can't make it right. When I hung up, my hands were steady. Daniel looked at me from across the room, reading my face. He offered me everything I told him. And I said no. He smiled, not relieved, not surprised, proud. What I didn't know then was that the board had already started asking the questions Warren feared most. When you lose nearly $60 million in contracts in under a month, curiosity turns investigative. Auditors were brought in, email trails reviewed, patterns examined, and Warren's last shield, plausible deniability, was already cracking. The call from Bridgewater's HR department came 4 weeks after Warren told me I wasn't leadership material. They asked if I'd be willing to participate in an exit interview. Standard procedure, they said. The phrase would have sounded routine if it hadn't been delivered by an outside consulting firm instead of internal HR. That detail told me everything. This wasn't about improving morale. This was about damage assessment. I almost declined. I had already moved on. Apex was everything. Bridgewater never was. Clear expectations, competent leadership, and a culture that didn't confuse sacrifice with obligation. But something in me understood that this interview wasn't about my future. It was about the truth finally catching up to the past. So I agreed. The interviewer was calm, precise, and clearly well briefed. She asked about compensation, workload, leadership support. I answered factually. No emotion, no embellishment. Then she asked about the VP promotion. I told her about the 2-year timeline, the repeated assurances, the calendar invite titled VP Transition Planning. The meeting where Warren said the position had been paused despite written evidence to the contrary. I didn't accuse. I didn't speculate. I simply laid out the sequence of events. Then she asked if I had concerns about decision-making processes at Bridgewater. I thought about Maya Reynolds sitting in my chair, about routing decisions that cost tens of thousands, about Warren defending her while seasoned coordinators resigned in silence, about private meetings behind glass walls and promotions that didn't align with performance metrics. You should review potential conflicts of interest in staffing and promotion decisions, I said carefully, particularly regarding interim operational leadership after my departure. That was all. One sentence, no drama, no names spoken aloud. The interviewer nodded and moved on. 2 weeks later, Warren Hale was terminated for cause. Not a quiet resignation, not a graceful transition. Terminated. The official statement cited conduct inconsistent with company values and fiduciary responsibilities. Industry insiders filled in the rest quickly. The audit uncovered an inappropriate relationship between Warren and Maya, one that predated her sudden rise, explained the preferential treatment, and exposed a trail of emails and calendar entries that removed any doubt about motive. Maya was gone the same day. Her role eliminated. No farewell email, no acknowledgement, just another system quietly correcting itself. Warren tried to fight it, claimed wrongful termination. The board's lawyers responded with a detailed summary of findings. He dropped the lawsuit within a week. 3 weeks later, his wife filed for divorce. I heard all of this secondhand the way you hear about storms after they've already passed. I felt no triumph. Just closure, the kind that settles slowly like dust after a long collapse. At Apex, I built something new. I promoted people who knew the work. I credited ideas properly. I went home on time more often than not. Daniel stopped asking when things would get better because they already had. For years, I'd been told I wasn't leadership material, that I was too operational, too reliable, too useful where I was. They were wrong. I wasn't infrastructure. I was the foundation. And when I walked away, everything built on top of me finally had to answer for itself.